Ever since peace talks for the Ukraine war began in earnest, Russian President Vladimir Putin has used the same tactics. He'll claim to want peace. He'll even meet with the likes of US President Donald Trump under the auspices of delivering that peace. But then he'll delay, and delay again, all because he believes that Russia can wear down Ukraine to the point where Putin gets exactly what he wants from peace discussions. The maximalist demands he has maintained since almost the beginning of his so-called special military operation. But Putin is in for a rude awakening. Far from being the weakened nation that Putin presents it as, Ukraine is only getting stronger in 2026. Super weapons are going to be coming to Ukraine throughout the year, meaning that Putin is running out of time to get what he wants from the war that he started. This is no minor military challenge that Russia now faces. According to a January 2nd article by United 24 Media, 2026 is shaping up to be the year that sees Ukraine undergo the most dramatic military upgrade yet since Putin launched his invasion. The influx of Western weapons seen for several years is combining with a growing domestic defense industry to ensure that Ukraine will have enormous stockpiles of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, fighter jets, air defense systems, and even early warning aircraft. Putin's claims that Ukraine is doomed are proving as shallow as the excuses he gave for why Russia invaded its neighbor in the first place. And if Ukraine receives everything that it believes it will receive in 2026, it will be Putin who is doomed, rather than the country he's trying to place under the Russian boot. Multiple programs already underway suggest 2026 may mark a qualitative turning point for Ukraine's Air Force and integrated air defense network, United 24 Media claims. And that turning point may begin with the arrival of a new weapon that could change the face of the aerial battle in Ukraine, Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets. As Breaking Defense reports, Ukraine reached a framework agreement with Sweden in October 2025 that could lead to Ukraine receiving anywhere between 100 and 150 Gripen E fighter jets over the next few years. At the time, Sweden claimed it could take up to 3 years for the first of these jets to arrive in Ukraine once the ink had dried on the deal. While the deal remains in the pipeline, Sweden and Ukraine have discussed potential interim options that could enhance Ukraine's air capabilities in 2026. Though Ukraine has to wait a while for the Gripen E, it might receive several JAS-39 Gripen C and Gripen D fighter jets in 2026. All of these jets are pre-used, but that won't bother Ukraine. Sweden has even made preparations to ensure the ongoing viability of these airframes, as it formally reserved support packages and spare parts for the Gripen Cs and Ds back in 2024. Those parts and packages were needed for delivery, and 2026 might just be the year they go from being reserved, being used. Ukraine expects to receive 14 of these older Gripen variants as it awaits the 100 or more of the modern Gripens that it's set to acquire from Sweden. But don't let age fool you. Ukraine's pilots already love the Gripen, and they believe that it will play a massive role in Ukraine achieving air superiority over Russia. That perspective was confirmed by a Ukrainian pilot named Vadim Voroshlyov at around the same time as the news broke of Ukraine's deal with Sweden. For me, the JAS-39 is the only fighter in the world I'd be willing to sell my soul for, Voroshlyov exclaimed in an Instagram post, going on to claim that the jets would be an ideal option for Ukraine. 2026 could see the ideal becoming Ukraine's reality, and it's a reality that Russia isn't ready to deal with. United 24 Media says that it's not just the Gripens themselves that will worry Putin's pilots. Crucially, Gripen's primary air-to-air weapon is the Meteor missile, the longest-range Western air-to-air missile with an engagement range approaching 200 kilometers, the outlet says. 200 kilometers is roughly equivalent to 124 miles, which is further than any missile that Ukraine is cleared to use, deployable by the F-16s and Mirage 2005s that Ukraine already has can fly. Defense Watch adds that the Meteor, which was introduced into service in 2016, can hit speeds of over Mach 4, and that it's loaded with a high-explosive fragmentation warhead weighing 30 kilograms or 66 pounds. With fire-and-forget capabilities, it offers Ukraine the ability to hit targets from such a massive distance that its jets don't come under fire from Russian fighters or air defense systems. That's a potential game-changer for Ukraine. And it means that Russia's aircraft, cruise missiles, and drones will all face a new and devastating threat in 2026. But it's not the Gripens alone that will add to Ukraine's aerial might in 2026. While the Swedish jets give Ukraine new defensive and offensive capabilities, another aircraft will take to the skies this year that may be an even more important force multiplier. That aircraft is the Saab 340 AEW&C, or Airborne Early Warning and Control. And this particular aircraft could finally fill the missing piece in the Ukrainian air defense puzzle that has caused the country so many problems as Russia intensified its aerial bombardments throughout 2025. According to United 24 Media, Sweden announced the planned transfer of the Saab 340, which is also known as the ASC 890, to Ukraine back in May 2024. However, delays hampered the transfer, with the likely reason for the slowdown being the need to upgrade Ukraine's older F-16s so that they could successfully data link with the aircraft. It seems that at least some of those compatibility issues had been resolved by April 2025. In that month, Military Watch magazine reported that Ukraine had taken delivery of the first of 2 Saab 340s promised to it, and that the aircraft was already active in the Lviv region. It's been well over a year and a half since that first Saab 340 delivery. Finally, 2026 will probably see the arrival of the second of these aircraft. What makes the Saab 340 so important is revealed in the AEW&C designation. This is an early warning aircraft that serves several potential functions for Ukraine. For fighter jets such as the incoming Gripens, the Saab 340 provides access to off-board radar data that those jets can use to do whatever they need to do. In other words, the Saab 340 flies outside the range of Russian air defenses that could be used to shoot it out of the skies. All the while, it serves as an eye in the sky for Ukraine's fighter jets, revealing everything from incoming missiles and drones to other aircraft that could present threats to Ukraine's jets. Take the Meteor missile we just mentioned as an example of why this capability matters so much to Ukraine. Without early warning aircraft, Ukraine's pilots have to rely solely on information provided to them by their onboard radars and ground support. Those onboard radars often can't see potential targets until they're well within range of Meteor missiles, which eliminates the key long-range benefit these missiles offer. A Saab 340 allows Ukrainian fighter pilots to better exploit the range of Meteor and similar missiles by providing off-board targeting data, while helping to reduce the risk to aircraft receiving cueing from the Saab 340. This is a force multiplier, as United 24 Media puts it. And beyond ensuring that missiles like the Meteor can be used to their fullest capacity, the Saab 340 also drastically improves how well Ukraine can detect incoming drones and cruise missiles. According to defense industry, the Saab 340 is so effective as an early warning system that it could even enable Ukraine to shoot down some of Russia's most advanced fighter jets, such as the Su-35. Why? Well, because even though the likes of the Su-35 are technically better than many of the aging Western fighters being delivered to Ukraine, such jets are placed at a significant disadvantage when a Saab 340 detects them and enables Ukraine's older jets to fire from such massive distances that Su-35s can't effectively respond. Russia has already experienced this problem firsthand. The first Saab 340 that entered Ukraine played a role in the first instance of a Ukrainian F-16 shooting down a Russian Su-35. The Swedish AEW&C aircraft detected Russia's fighter jet from about 200 kilometers away, allowing an F-16 to close in and fire off an AIM-120 missile long before the Su-35 pilot knew it was coming. Now, Ukraine is most likely getting a second Saab 340. The country's aerial detection capabilities stand to expand significantly, and that's something that will concern Putin as he tries to overwhelm Ukraine with Russian aerial might. Ukraine has done an excellent job of minimizing the impact that Russia's aircraft have had during the war, as evidenced by the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance's report of the destruction of 434 Russian planes and 347 helicopters. However, the country has been less successful at defending itself against drones, along with the missiles and glide bombs that Russia's aircraft are now firing at Ukraine from a safe distance. That's due to Russia massively ramping up the number of these aerial projectiles that it's firing into Ukraine. On December 31st, Novaya Gazeta reported that 2025 saw Russia fire 2,400 missiles, 60,000 glide bombs, and 100,000 drones at Ukraine. These numbers are enormous, with the 100,000 drones launched amounting to more than 6 times the 15,000 drones Russia launched in 2023 and 2024 combined. Another Saab 340 arriving in Ukraine is far from a silver bullet that would solve the air defense challenges this sheer volume of projectiles creates. However, it's an invaluable asset that Ukraine can use to detect the most lethal of the projectiles that Russia fires, making the incoming Saab 340 a key part of Ukraine's 2026 air defense strategy. There's just one problem with the Saab 340 from an air defense standpoint. It can detect incoming threats, but it can't do much about them. The Gripens that Ukraine could receive in 2026 would work alongside the new Saab 340 to solve that problem, as well as Ukraine's existing stockpiles of Western fighter jets. However, 2026 could also see the arrival of another form of air defense system that could cement the Saab 340 as a crucial piece placed in the Ukraine war air defense puzzle, the SAMP-TNG. United 24 Media reports that France intends to deliver up to 8 of these brand new air defense platforms to Ukraine, giving Ukraine access to one of Europe's most advanced air defense systems in the process. The SAMP-TNG specializes in taking out incoming aerial threats at range, though there is the small problem of the system still being in the development phase. The platform is nearing the end of that phase at least, and is likely to enter formal service in France and elsewhere in Europe in 2026. Ukraine will likely be among the first recipients of the initial production run of the SAMP-TNG, with United 24 media also speculating that Ukraine may even receive prototype versions of the system ahead of its official entry into service. This platform is cutting-edge technology, and Ukraine could serve as a testing ground for its capabilities. If all goes to plan, Ukraine gets a set of air defenses capable of dealing with ballistic missile threats in a way that few other Western systems, barring the US-made Patriot, have done in the past. Don't mistake Ukraine being a testing ground of sorts as a case of France using Ukraine to see if the new system works. Both the French and Italian versions of the SAMP-TNG completed their trials toward the end of 2024, confirming the viability of new radars and interceptor missiles installed into the system in the process. The SAMP-TNG is the finished article. Ukraine will just be proving that it works in combat. Doing so will give Ukraine the sort of air defense system that allows it to make the best possible use of the Saab 340 we already mentioned. Plus, the ballistic and cruise missiles that Russia spent much of 2025 firing into Ukraine will become less effective because these systems will be active in 2026. A quick look at the platform's specifications demonstrates why. The SAMP-TNG has a surveillance range of around 400 kilometers, or around 248 miles, Army technology reports. When paired with a roaming Saab 340, this range means that Ukraine will know about incoming ballistic missiles in plenty of time to respond to them. Those responses will come from the SAMP-TNG itself, as the platform is capable of firing a missile that has a range of over 150 kilometers, or about 93 miles. The system has also been designed with rapid deployment in mind. Army technology says that the SAMP-TNG can be deployed quickly by a small air defense crew, and that it integrates almost immediately with the types of air defense networks that Ukraine has already installed. Each SAMP-TNG contains up to 6 launchers, which are used to rattle off up to 48 Aster missiles that can reach speeds of Mach 4.5. Only hypersonic missiles can exceed these types of speeds. The majority of Putin's cruise and ballistic missiles can be countered by the new air defense systems that Ukraine will be receiving in 2026. And Ukraine desperately needs the arrival of SAMP-TNGs to happen sooner rather than later. Building on what we discussed earlier regarding the sheer scale of Russia's aerial assaults against Ukraine in 2025, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has emphasized just how important the arrival of more air defense systems in Ukraine will be. On January 5th, UKR Inform reported on Zelensky's comments about yet another Russian airstrike on Kyiv. This attack destroyed a hospital, leading to 1 civilian death and several injuries. Zelensky called for more support in dealing with these types of threats, stating, "And it's crucial that our partners never forget, air defense is needed every day. Funding for the production of interceptor drones is needed every day. Equipment for the energy sector is needed every day." The SAMP-TNGs that Ukraine could receive go some way into solving the air defense problem that Zelensky highlights. These new European platforms will also join the 2 additional Patriot air defense systems deployed in Ukraine on January 1st. Those Patriot deployments were made possible by a $1.4 billion deal that Ukraine signed with Germany, and they, along with the SAMP-TNGs, mean that Ukraine will have far more options available when it comes to how it defends its cities and infrastructure in 2026. As important as defense is, it's going on the attack that will ensure that Ukraine has a chance of toppling Putin and defeating Russia in 2026. Ukraine knows this better than anybody, and it also knows that deep strikes into Russian territory are key to crippling Putin's war machine. That brings us to the next weapon that will arrive in Ukraine this year, the Extended Range Attack Munition, or ERAM. The arrival of ERAM gives Ukraine a low-cost, long-range weapon that it can use to cause even more devastation at the oil refineries and other military targets inside Russia that Ukraine spent much of 2025 targeting. United 24 media explains why ERAMs are such a huge get for Ukraine, stating, "With a range of up to 400 kilometers and a unit cost of roughly $246,000, these missiles offer exceptional value. It's that low unit cost that is the key here, as it means that Ukraine can secure thousands of these missiles for far less than it would have to spend to purchase other Western-made long-range weapons." That's precisely what Ukraine has done. In August 2025, the Defense Security Cooperation Agency announced that Ukraine had spent $825 million to buy 3,350 ERAMs from the United States. Funding for the deal comes from Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and foreign military financing, the agency reports. Now think about the figures we shared earlier when speaking about Russia's 2025 airstrikes against Ukraine. We told you that Russia launched about 2,400 missiles at Ukraine last year. The arrival of huge quantities of ERAM missiles allows Ukraine to go missile to missile against Russia. and it can do so while spending far less money than Russia spends on its cruise and ballistic missiles. And it gets better. 2 of Ukraine's domestically produced missiles are expected to enter full production in 2026. Both developed by Firepoint, these missiles expand Ukraine's deep strike capabilities even further. The first is the FP7, which is a ballistic missile that has a 200-kilometer range and is capable of delivering a 150-kilogram or 330-pound warhead to a target. That missile will soon complete codification and is expected to enter service in the second half of 2026. The FP7 will be joined by Firepoint's FP9, which delivers even more range and firepower. Specifically, this new domestically produced missile can travel up to 855 kilometers or 531 miles, which opens up strikes against key targets such as oil refineries outside of the border regions. The 800 kilograms or 1,763 pounds of explosive force that the FP9 delivers is also enough to absolutely wreck whatever the missile strikes in ways that aren't possible with long-range drones. Firepoint expects to complete its FP9 trials at some point during the summer of 2026, which will likely be soon enough for Ukraine to prepare some devastating presents that it can deliver to Russia as we approach Christmas of 2026. All of this means that Ukraine will potentially be more dangerous than Putin expected in 2026. The arrival of another surveillance aircraft, along with air defense systems that can track targets from hundreds of miles away, means that Ukraine's air combat reach could extend. Ballistic threats could be more easily countered by Ukraine's new air defenses, and both domestically made and Western long-range missiles allow Ukraine to sustain powerful, deep strikes on a massive scale. Putin wants you to think the demise of Ukraine is inevitable as he angles for a peace deal that will destroy his enemy. But 2026 may be a turning point for Ukraine rather than Russia. And that means Russia's president is running out of time if he wants to convince anybody that Ukraine is on the verge of collapse. As Putin grapples with what Russia can possibly do about the massive influx of weapons that could arrive in Ukraine this year, he's also dealing with the brilliance of Ukraine's spies. They've just outsmarted Russia with a brilliant move that saw them extract $500,000 from Russia's war chest. How did they do it? Find out in our video. And remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the Ukraine war as it progresses into 2026. And thank you, as always, for watching.